This is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.
What's up, Kansas City? I'm your host, Glenn Frizell, filming here at the Lincoln Building, new home of Kansas City Business Association. Today's special guest is Councilman Scott Wagner, who is the councilman, 1st District at Large here in Kansas City, Kansas. This is his first time on What's Up, Kansas City. We'd like to welcome you to the show, Councilman Wagner.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's just dive right in. Where do you stand on the recent minimum wage debate? We know that certain city leaders are pushing for more, while some businesses say we need to kind of pull back a little bit, that it will hurt their overall profits if we do get up to $15, $16 an hour. What about this minimum wage? Will it bring back a middle class that a lot of people are worried is disappearing?
Sure. Well, you've got a lot of things within that question, and certainly I've spent a lot of time and worked with the mayor and Councilman Reed as that minimum wage piece went around. You know, one of the things that we really tried to get to is understanding what is the right amount for Kansas City. As you know, the $15 minimum wage piece has been a national movement across the country, but started in places like San Francisco and Seattle and other places along the coast who had a higher standard of living, and their consumer price indexes were higher than Kansas City.
So we're kind of modeling our
we kind of
efforts after.
Well, kind of modeling, kind of starting with what they did and knowing that in their case, they, you know, in some cases like with Seattle, they would spend a year trying to figure out what the right number was for them. We had an accelerated time frame for a lot of reasons, but I think what was compelling for us as we came to the numbers that we passed through ordinance was looking at the minimum wage historically. And currently, well, if you were to compare today's minimum wage in Kansas City, which is $7.65, which is the state minimum wage, and you looked back at minimum wage over the past 30 or 40 years, its highest buying power was in 1980 when it was about $8.68 in today's dollars. So it was pretty clear that the buying power of today's minimum wage was much different, much lower.
Middle class was rolling back then.
That's right, and at the same time, we were able to look at what is the average amount of money being paid in the fast food business, in retail businesses, and we were finding that your average was somewhere in the $9 category. So we were able to make a case that a beginning move to $8.50 and then creating a scale that went all the way to $13 was not only probably historically consistent with what buying power should be, but also consistent with what the cost of living is in Kansas City versus places like Seattle, versus places like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and others that have done a similar sort of push to minimum wage. As another example, Louisville, over 3 years, will move their minimum wage to $9, which is more of a comparable as far as the consumer price index there to here. So we were trying to make a lot of things work all at once so that when businesses, you know, had the pushback that we expected, we could say that we were basing our numbers not so much as something that we would pull out of the air, but rather something based on history, based on fact, based on the numbers that are more appropriate to Kansas City. I might just add that there's still a lot of question marks really as to what will ultimately happen with the minimum wage, primarily because we've passed the ordinance. Now there may be a referendum on that ordinance which pushes the date that it would be effective depending upon whether or not that referendum is successful. So I say all that just to say that the council has taken some action, and I think some action that we can defend. Whether or not that translates into folks actually seeing that minimum wage rise, unfortunately, I can't say with certainty where that will ultimately land. But
Are you for a rise in minimum wage?
well, I am, because I think we've proven that because of the buying power or the lack thereof over time, that there is reason to say that if in 1980 your minimum wage at that time could buy you more than the minimum wage of 2015, something needs to happen.
Yeah.
Something needs to be fixed. And so, but unfortunately, it's hard to say where that fix will ultimately come.
Fair enough. Let me ask you, you are a member of the Greater Kansas City Convention and Visitors Association. Okay. Where do you stand on the building of the convention hotel, and how will it benefit your viewers, particularly those in the First District?
Sure. Well, you know, the interesting thing about hotels and the tourism business in general is it's a very non-direct way of participating in the city. You know, we see people who come to visit Kansas City. They come to a hotel. They come to our restaurants. They go see our museums, and then they're gone. And you never really see them directly. However, they do make an impact on us.
Sure.
So, you know, from my perspective, what has made the hotel discussion in particular a very interesting one was the constraints that we put on it from the very beginning, which was two things primarily. We did not want to take money from our general fund, which goes and pays for everything like police and fire and our neighborhood codes enforcement officers. We didn't want to touch that part of our budget in order to facilitate creating a new hotel. By the same token, we also did not want to fall into the issue that we had with the Power and Light District, where the city put its full faith and credit behind the construction of the project. So many times you'll hear, for example, that the city is having to pay for power and light, which this year we paid $12 million because the city backed the bonds that were created to build power and light. So when it came to the hotel, one of our...
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money, and that's a lot of things that can't happen because of it. And that's not to say...
We're trying to make money, we're not trying to dole out money.
Exactly.
Potentially risky.
Exactly. So, you know, in this case, there was an understanding of risk, but we wanted to contain the risk as much as possible. So the city's participation on the hotel comes primarily in the form of the usage of our convention and tourism tax, which we collect on for, you know, conventions that come into town. When people, you know, book hotel stays in Kansas City, there's a little piece of that that goes into our convention and tourism tax, which helps go towards things that help improve those sorts of businesses.
So the model is businessly, economically sound, and you do feel that it will benefit.
Yeah, because what's happened is every time we've made improvements in our convention offerings, whether that is the expansion of Bartle Hall or when the ballroom was constructed at Bartle Hall, even when Power and Light was built because it provided an entertainment area that was close by our convention facilities, each time we would see a rise in the number of conventions that would come to Kansas City. So our expectation is that, and we have constantly heard this I guess knock on Kansas City, for lack of a better term, that great city, great amenities, but if you wanted to have a large-scale convention, it was problematic because at some level, either the rooms that we had available were too old, or it didn't have the amenities that convention goers are used to now, or the number of rooms that were desired weren't close enough to the convention center. All of these things kind of created an atmosphere where very clearly we were seeing that Kansas City was being taken off lists of locations that conventions were considering, that we were outgrowing some conventions because there was a desire to have more rooms closer into to our convention facilities. So the real question then becomes, can you create a deal, for lack of a better term, that does not create risk for the city and that does not front load a payment from our general fund? And I would tell you, even before this whole deal that we recently approved went through, we were getting proposals that were asking for $50 million of general fund money or more.
How interesting.
even before you got into convention and tourism tax participation. So what we've built is something where the primary participation, as far as the city is concerned, comes from the very thing that we are trying to attract, as far as conventions and then convention goers paying for hotel rooms within proximity of the center. So, you know, because of those constraints that we had put on the front end, and saying you've really got to meet those things before you'll even, you know, have an opportunity to come talk to us. I think if there was ever a deal that the city were to have, this would be the best one that you would ever expect to get.
Thank you for sharing with us. Councilman Wagner, we know that schools has started, or is starting for most school-aged children. Can you tell us a little bit about where you stand as far as education and your constituents there in the first district?
Sure. Well, you know, I'm a father of two. I've got two boys, 10 years old and 7 years old.
Congratulations.
And so, thank you.
Yeah.
Some days I need condolences. I'm kidding.
That's the age.
That is the age, right? But
sure
they are very active, but what it says to me is that the need for not only education in the most general of senses, but really the preparation of the skill sets that they need to be productive as they move into adulthood and as they move on to their own careers is so much more important. You know, we're very lucky in the Northland and in the First District, where we have a number of school districts that are participating in programs that, especially at the high school level, are trying to prepare students for that career. So
And you went to high school in Northland?
I'm a graduate of Oak Park High School, 1989. Go Northmen. You know, I should have worn my blue on blue today, frankly, for them. But you know, whether you are in the North Kansas City District or Liberty School Districts, which are within the First District, or south of the river, whether you go to Center or the Kansas City, Missouri schools, or you know, we have 15 different districts, whole or in part, in Kansas City, which creates a number of options for anyone who wants to educate their children. But the goal that I think I would have, certainly our mayor and council have expressed, is this idea that we need to create the supports for those districts to be successful. Many times that means we have to be good advocates for them. Sometimes that means we have to work with them to see if there are infrastructure needs that we can help them with. You know, are there ways that we can piggyback off of...
You have an open door policy, correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We spent a good deal of time in this last term, and in my position as First District Councilman, to work with the North Kansas City School District, to work with the Liberty School District, to try to figure out what problems do we have. Do we have mutual solutions to those problems?
Now, Councilman Walker, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about streetcar.
Yeah.
Other than what we saw on the front page today, that streetcar is a little late, and they are worried whether or not it is going to present itself ready before March Madness. But originally you said that you would like the streetcar to expand into areas that voters and property owners are prepared to tax themselves. Do you still stand firm with that statement?
Well, I think, frankly, that is probably the only way an expansion happens. I think, as you know, and many of your viewers will recall, we've had probably over the last 20 years a number of different plans for transit, and I say that in the most general of sense because we've had light rail pieces, we've had streetcar pieces, we've had combinations of multiple pieces of transit, bus rapid transits, a number of things out there. And it has proven to be very difficult on a citywide basis for the entire city to get behind multimodal transit, or even more specifically, light rail or streetcars. Where we seem to be successful is where the people who are in proximity of where a proposed line would go seem to be not only open to the idea, but seem open to paying for it. And I think even the vote that was taken last August for the streetcar expansion, where you had 3 different lines along, you know, one along Independence Avenue, one along Linwood, one along Main Street heading towards UMKC.
That's some work.
A lot of work there. But we also found in there that there was disagreement along a couple of those lines, but agreement in one area along Main Street. And so, you know, it seems to me that where people are excited about the opportunity, and they will figure out whatever that opportunity is for them, whether as a user, whether as a property owner, it seems to me that the best way to move forward is to go to those who want that amenity, and not to necessarily go around to those who either may not see the value or the value may be very limited to them.
Leave it up to the voter.
And leave it up to them.
Councilman Wagner, I have two more questions
Sure.
for you. I should mention that you recently were assigned Mayor Pro Tem,
Mm-hmm.
so you act in the mayor's absence.
Mhm.
You also are chair of the Finance and Governance Committee.
Mhm.
Lee Barnes of the 5th District at Large serves with you on that.
Mhm.
And you are also on the Housing Committee,
Mhm.
which Quentin Lucas, he's been on the show,
Mhm.
3rd District at Large Councilman. We'd just like to talk to you a little bit about governance and economic development.
Mm-hmm.
We at What's Up Kansas City, we kind of try to stress that government should not be based on a who you know approach.
Mhm.
That if you vote, even if you necessarily don't have the political connections and the deep pockets,
Mhm.
your voice still should be heard,
Mhm.
and you still should be active part of your neighborhood.
Right.
As far as government will allow you to be. Where do you stand on this issue in governance and letting not just the big people talk, but letting everybody have a voice?
Well, I appreciate that comment, and I think there's often this feeling that that the voices that are going to get heard are a limited number, and that they can't participate. The reality is that there are ample opportunities to it, and we want to continue to encourage that. So whether that is through the public meetings that we'll have, and I would just say, we will begin working on our 5-year budget plan here very, very soon, and there will be public meetings out there. We are always challenged by the limited number of people that come, and so my hope is whether they see see this broadcast or whether they see other broadcasts related to the city, that they understand that we want their participation, and frankly, when we set up our budget, especially, which obviously that's where my energy will go to over the next several months, without knowing what is desired, without knowing what is preferred, because unfortunately we do not have unlimited number of funds, and sometimes we have to look at 2 programs and say, okay, we can either do both not so good, or we can do one really well, but we may have to fall back on another thing. To be able to go through a process where people are engaging with us and they're giving us an idea of what their preferences might be is tremendously helpful, because ultimately we're going to produce a budget, or we're going to produce some activity related to economic development, and without knowing on the front end what do people really want to see, we get into this idea of thinking we know, and then we put it out there, and then we find out that wasn't what we wanted, but we're already into it. So I need all of it.
Is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, how can our viewers actually reach you?
So in order to reach me, you can call me at City Hall at 816-513-6503. You can also email me at scott.wagner, so SCOTT.WAGNER @kcmo.org. Or you can find me on Facebook, look for Scott Wagner and Councilman in parentheses, or you can find me on Twitter at KC First District. And one of those ways or another, you're going to find me.
And we mentioned economic development shortly. What projects are you working on in the 1st District that your constituents can look forward to seeing some progress?
Well, we're trying to do a lot of infrastructure improvements, specifically along North Woodland, which is the boundary between 1st District and 2nd District. We continue to work in the Vivian Road and Antioch area, trying to keep redeveloping all around there. We're going to be doing a lot of work with our partners in the 2nd District on Metro North. For those who grew up as I did in the Northland and they remember going to Metro North for a number of things, they've been waiting a long time to see redevelopment there, so we're going to be working a lot up there.
Any final words, Councilman Wagner?
Well, first of all, I just appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the engagement that viewers are having. I want to encourage you to continue that engagement. There are lots of opportunities to. Don't feel like someone is going to speak for you. Please take the opportunity to speak for yourself in all the ways that we'll have that available for you. And I'll look forward to visiting with the viewers and with you again here real soon.
What's up, Kansas City? We are Cascade Media Group.
CMG is calling all small businesses, organizations, solicitors of products or services that would like to reach their KC Metro viewers and would like our help.
We produce commercials, promote, advertise, and film events. Not to mention display company banners, including a link to your website on either of our sites.
That's whatsupkansascity.net, the premier outlet for Kansas City.
Or CascadeSports.tv, home of the student athletes.
If you're interested, contact CMG at 816-389-0259.
Or email us at mgcascademediagroup@hotmail.com.
And remember,
It pays to advertise.